Hey, men of BraveHeart, my name is Robb Overholt, and I am so thrilled and privileged to be able to have this opportunity to chat with you for a few minutes via technology and to offer you a challenge for the new year. Yes, that's right. In fact, I have a challenge for you for 2021 as we're just about 6 weeks from saying goodbye, possibly less, depending on when you're hearing this or watching this, from saying goodbye to 2020. Can't come too soon, am I right? But as we go into 2021, I do have a challenge for you, and I want to house the challenge in the context of a story that I'm sure you're familiar with, regardless of how often you read the scriptures. But it's the story of a man named David and another man named Goliath. And I'm sure you know it. There's the epic headline that little David, fell the giant Goliath. And it's such a big headline that even unbelievers to this very day at sporting events, when they're, kind of trying to describe an upset victory or a potential upset victory, they'll say it's like a real life David and Goliath story. Of course, you and I know that David and Goliath is a real life David and Goliath story, right? And this story has that epic headline that David fell the giant. But there are a couple of other things in the story that are very, very intriguing, one of which I really want to draw your attention towards today as I issue this challenge to you. And it's basically this. David gets sent to the battle by his father Jesse. David is tending sheep as he would do as a shepherd boy. His brothers are all at war on behalf of the Israelites. And his father says, go check on your brothers. And David's probably been waiting for this day for a very long time. And he's excited. He tends to the things he has to, and then he's off to the battlefield. Now, when David gets to the battlefield, there is palpable tension in the air. The scene is basically this. The Philistines have kind of proffered up an agreement with the Israelites. It wasn't an uncommon agreement for that day. They basically say this: hey, instead of us having this big war and battle and all of us, so much bloodshed, how about we send one of our guys, you send your best guy, they fight in the middle of the battlefield, whoever wins the whole kit and caboodle, basically, right? So if the Philistines send their man and he wins, the Israelites become slaves to the Philistines. If the Israelites' man wins, the Philistines become slaves to the Israelites. Sounds like a pretty good deal. But what happens is the Philistines know they have an ace in the hole. It's this 9-foot behemoth of a man named Goliath. So he comes out on the battlefield. It rightfully sends fear throughout all the ranks of the Israelites. They're literally petrified. No one wants to go fight this giant. When David shows up to the battlefield, interestingly though, he's got a little moxie. And he says, I'll fight this giant. Who dares to defy the armies of the living God? That's pretty amazing. And so word kind of goes through the ranks and gets to the king. We have a willing participant. The king sends for him, says, bring him to me. Now this King Saul brings this man David, this young shepherd boy, for him, and has the reaction of, oh my gosh, mocks him almost, says, oh, you're just a shepherd boy. How can you go fight the behemoth of a man that stands before us and threatens to imprison us all? So David gives a speech that would have made William Wallace jealous. He basically says things like, well, just like when I was watching over the sheep and the lion or the bear came and I dropped them on behalf of my sheep, this uncircumcised Philistine, quite the insult back in that day, I would imagine, right? This uncircumcised Philistine will be no different. So finally, Saul kind of acquiesces with, what I always like to imagine like a Southern belle in America, kind of, oh, bless his little heart, right? He's like, okay, you can go to battle, but you have to wear my tunic and gear. Now, I want you to imagine this. The king offers David his very own, the king, his majesty's own tunic and gear. And what a privilege this must have been culturally for him. I mean, you can only imagine like a shepherd boy getting to wear the king's tunic and gear into a great battle on behalf of all the Israelites. I mean, that's a lot of systemic pressure. But what an honor at the same time. And so David puts on this gear and he kind of clunks around in it a little bit. And what can only be counted as just remarkable emotional intelligence, incredible self-awareness, and even a smidge of audacity, he goes back before the king and he says, yeah, I can't wear this. This isn't me. This isn't how God made me. This is not how God has allowed this life to forge me. I'm a shepherd boy. I need a slingshot, and I'll take with me 5 stones, of which he would only need 1. Now, when David steps onto the battlefield, I want you to just pause for a second. Imagine the palpable tension that must have been in the air. Imagine the Israelite men that look at David, who has turned down the king's armor and tunic to go into battle with a slingshot and 5 stones against this behemoth of a man named Goliath. And everything is at stake for them. If David loses, they spend the rest of their life as slaves to these Philistines. I mean, the tension in the air had to be very real and very intense. David stepped out onto the battlefield in that way, as God made him, as God had allowed this life to forge him. He faced the derision of the giant who felt insulted that this little shepherd boy would come before him. But he soon shuts the mouth of the giant with one stone. And you know, as he lops the head off of this giant, there isn't a shred of evidence to suggest that David regrets his decision and thinks, maybe I should have worn the king's armor. He doesn't have it. He's secure in who he is. And so with that backdrop laid out before you, I want to issue you a challenge for the new year. I want to ask you, what would it take for you as a man created by God with a unique and set-apart identity to go into the new year without the armor? Without the armor that we've all fallen, I've done it, you've done it, we've all done it. We've allowed ourselves to be convinced that we need to wear certain armor. Maybe it's familial pressure, maybe it's employment pressure, maybe it's just cultural pressure, some sort of systemic pressure that tells us, if you really want to face the giants in this life, you got to wear this armor. But deep down in our hearts, in our minds, in our deep recesses of our minds, and in the core of who we are, we know, this just isn't me. This is not how God made me to be, and this is not how God has allowed my life to forge me. It doesn't feel right. And that we could have the confidence and even a smidge of audacity to walk into the battles of this life saying, that's not the armor I need. I need to go just as God made me into the battles he's prepared for me. Could you imagine that? Could you imagine your life that way? That's what BraveHeart is all about. And we want to challenge you going into this next year. What would it take for you to take off the armor? What would it take for you to drop the armor that was never made for you to carry and go into the battles as God designed you and created you to be? And so here's what I want to do. I don't want to just give you a challenge. I also want to offer you up a few things. And so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to offer you 2 Zoom calls. One is a Zoom call with me, where I would love to get data from you. I'm going to interview you. I'm going to ask you things like, what would it take not only for you, but for men you know? What kind of resources would they need in order to do this, in order to take this challenge and drop some of the armor that the world has convinced them, that the enemy has convinced them they must wear if they're going to drop giants, and allow them to be freed from that armor that wasn't created for them by their creator? What resources would they need? I want to spend some time interviewing, getting your opinion. The second Zoom call, basically you're going to get to interview me. You're going to get to find out a little bit about me. You might say, well, who are you? Well, good question. Let's talk about it. What are my credentials? And then I want to tell you in that call, it's kind of a backstage pass. I want to tell you about some exciting things kind of going on in the BraveHeart world that are coming, that are very exciting. In addition to these 2 Zoom calls, I'm going to give you a couple of other goodies. I'm going to send you some resources that just allow you to get through the holidays and remind you of some things to stay focused on the right things during this holiday season. And this is all going to be done for $50. So I know you make a lot of investments, and I know it's year end, but for $50, you'll get the 2 Zoom calls and some other goodies. And here's the thing I want you to know about those $50. Every single one of those dollars is going to go into a scholarship fund for men who've not yet been through the BraveHeart Intensive. We want as many men to get access to this as possible. So would you be generous with that? Offer up your $50. You're going to get something for it. 2 Zoom calls. I promise I'll try to make it worth all of your time. And I'm going to give you some other goodies too. For now, I'm Robb Overholt. My challenge for you: how do we drop the armor that the enemy in the world has convinced us that we need when we don't need it? We have everything we need in our identity in Christ. How do we move forward in 2021 with it? Thanks for your time. I appreciate it so much. I look forward to getting to know each and every one of you better. Talk to you soon.